Hello hockey fans, Oddman Rush here and welcome back to another episode of This Week in Hockey, the series where we recap some of the biggest news from across the hockey world over the last 7 days, and we look at each of these stories in a little bit more detail. Now another week of NHL hockey has come and gone. You guys have once again sent me some really interesting topics to discuss, because of course there's been plenty to talk about from across the league, both good and bad. Now I did see in the comments of my previous video that somebody suggested I try and wrap an entire episode of This Week in Hockey. I'm not going to do that, but seeing as you guys want me to try and rap something, I guess I could try and spit a few bars here, right? So give me a beat. Yeah, my name is Oddman Rush and I'm here to say, I love talking hockey in a major way. I guess this rap has to say cheerio because it's time to get on with the video. Word. I guess that wasn't so bad, was it? Let's just get into it, shall we? So our first topic comes from Matthew Giffrian, who wants me to discuss the Seattle Kraken and how they have fallen back to earth after their dark horse run last year. He also says that he knows it's early, but the Kraken have shown no semblance of being the team that took out the Cup champions and almost made the Stanley Cup finals just last year. Now Matthew, you're entirely correct. The Seattle Kraken have had a really poor, incredibly disappointing start to the 23-24 season. 1-4-1 in their first 6 games, as far as I'm aware at the time of this recording, and goal scoring has been a huge problem for them. Now I did see Seattle's most recent game at the time of this recording, at home against the New York Rangers at the Climate Pledge Arena. And yeah, once again, that was not a very strong game for them. They did score the first goal of the game, I believe, on the power play. But yeah, after that, they really struggled to play against the Rangers. And I'm not just saying that as a Rangers fan personally. You could tell that the Rangers were by far the better team. I think also the lighting issue caused a bit of a problem. For those of you who aren't aware what happened, the Climate Pledge Arena had a bit of an issue during that game, where if you looked at the broadcast, if you were watching it on TV, on the left-hand side, you had Philip Grubauer and the Seattle team. That was their zone. And then the Rangers and Jonathan Quick in net for the Rangers were on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, the lighting in the away end of the ice was significantly darker than the lighting in both the neutral zone and the Seattle Kraken zone. So there was a bit of an issue there, to the point where the referees and the Toronto office genuinely considered suspending the game, because obviously there's a bit of an advantage there for the attacking team in that zone. But they consulted with both the goalies, both Grubauer and Quick said, yeah, we're happy to play on. So they decided to play on. And unfortunately for the Kraken, they've had struggles lighting the lamp this year so far. And now they've got a situation where they can't even light their own arena properly. But in terms of the roster itself, as far as I'm aware, there hasn't really been any big changes compared to last season. They didn't really sign any big splash superstar free agents as far as I'm aware. The roster's pretty much intact, especially the forward core that they've got together. The only big move I know is Brian Dumoulin, the defenseman from Pittsburgh who signed with Seattle, and they've paired him once again with one of his former defensive partners, Justin Schultz. And those two, when they played in Pittsburgh, did pretty well for themselves, won a couple of Stanley Cups. So far in Seattle though, it's not going quite the way that they would have hoped. Not necessarily because of those two, but you've still got Jared McCann, you've still got Jaden Schwartz, you've still got Alexander Wenberg. Most of the guys, most of the roster's still pretty much intact, but they're not scoring goals. So I guess the really big question here is the Seattle Kraken just off to a slow start and they're still that almost cup finalist team they were last year? Or was last year a blip in the radar, kind of an unsuspecting, a surprising run, and they're actually still a team that really shouldn't be going as deep as they should? They've still got the same head coach in Dave Haxtell, who, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm still not completely convinced that he's an NHL head coach. But yeah, the Seattle Kraken, they've really struggled to score goals this year. They've had one great game against the Carolina Hurricanes, but other than that, they have one of the lowest scoring teams in the National Hockey League so far this season. So whether it's a case of they need to try and juggle the lines a little bit, whether it's a case of some of their guys are just going on a cold streak to start. They don't have Brandon Tanev in the lineup, who's been out for a little while, so that might impact it a little bit. And they have just lost Andrei Burakovsky for, I think, 6 to 8 weeks due to a hit by Jacob Trouba, I want to say, during that Rangers game. It might get worse before it gets better, seeing as they've lost 2 of their kind of keystone forwards. Some of the other players need to step up and show that they deserve to be in the lineup, deserve to be as high as they are in the lineup, and I guess the next few weeks and months of the regular season will really show us whether Seattle has just had a slow start to the year. Once they get healthy, once they get going, that they return to being the team that they were last season, or whether last year was an outlier and they've now come crashing back down to earth. Obviously, still very early on in the season. We're not even 10% of the way through the schedule yet. There's still plenty of time to turn it round, but good luck, Seattle. By the looks of it, you're really going to need it. Next up, we have a question from Loser Kids who asks, why is BioSteel still behind the benches? I thought they were in bankruptcy. Now that's a really good question actually, because obviously just before the season started, there was this big announcement, BioSteel, basically the new hydration drink of the National Hockey League. They announced that they were filing for bankruptcy and they were looking for a buyer. They were actively selling the company. So obviously seeing them still behind the benches, seeing their kind of drinks and their bottles still in the NHL, still in the penalty boxes, is kind of weird for some people. Now obviously I'm not a financial expert. I have made some videos on some players going bankrupt, but I am by no means an expert on bankruptcy or anything like that. I guess the fact that they still have kind of outstanding debts to the NHL means that the league can essentially still use their product while not really having to pay them as much as they did, or having to pay them anything at all maybe. And also, just because a company has gone bankrupt doesn't mean that that company just suddenly disappears and is wiped off the face of the earth. They're actively looking for a new buyer for the company, so it likely means that they want to keep the brand going and showing how reputable the brand is, that hopefully a buyer comes in with a bit more of a stable income situation. They come and buy the company and they either take it to new heights, they absorb it into an existing company that they have, or they just decide to shut the whole thing down and kind of cut their losses. So I did also think to myself, why is BioSteel still here? I thought they had like millions of dollars of debt to the NHL, but maybe that's why they're still around, because there are millions of dollars of debt. They're obviously wanting to stay behind NHL benches and still be an NHL product, because that increases their brand recognition, probably increases their chances of being sold to another company. But at the same time, I would imagine the NHL is getting BioSteel behind their benches this season at a significantly lower cost, or no cost whatsoever, because obviously BioSteel still owes millions of dollars to the NHL. So it's a very interesting situation, and I'm very curious to see what happens here. But in terms of why they're still there, I have absolutely no idea. So does that help? Probably not, right? And lastly, we have Sasha Bengio on Twitter, who wants me to explore the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and how that led to the miracle on ice. I mean, that's an interesting challenge and definitely an exciting one to end this video with. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a huge history buff and I absolutely adore history, so this is very much in my wheelhouse here. So I'm actually going to try and attempt this, guys. I'm going to see if I can find a link, albeit very rough, so just bear with me here. Now, some of you might be sitting there wondering, who is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Oddman Rush? I don't know, read a history book or something. I'm going to get on with it, okay? So the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand took place in 1914, and it was very much seen as the main catalyst for the start of the First World War. Between 1914 and 1918, the world was at war, right? Number one, first one, the prequel. Now, one of the countries that was fighting in the First World War was Russia, but they decided to bow out of the war before the end in 1918. They left in 1917 due to a communist revolution led by Lenin and the Soviets. Obviously, Lenin and the Soviets, they then took control of Russia. They turned it from Russia into the Soviet Union, got rid of the royal family in Russia. It becomes the Soviet Union. Fast forward to the Second World War now. Lenin has passed away. Stalin is now in charge of both the Soviet Union and Russia. He's in charge of the country. He helps lead the country to victory against the Nazis during the Second World War. Now, after World War II ended, Stalin decided he wanted to show the rest of the world that the Soviet Union was far superior than everybody else, so he decides to turn his attention to sports, basically tell his staff that he wants to have the best athletes in the world in the Soviet Union, which in turn causes the creation of the Red Army hockey team. And obviously the Red Army hockey team would go on to absolutely dominate the international stage over the years. They would win all sorts of gold medals at World Championships, Olympic Games. They then go and compete at the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, where they meet an upstart Team USA full of college players who have never played professionally, have never trained professionally, and thanks to the heroics of Team USA, they managed to get the job done and they managed to win. So technically, thanks to the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and the following World War that took place, the Red Army team was created and Team USA were able to defeat them at the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. Boom! Mic drop. I'm not actually going to drop this mic, it's very expensive, but I did it, right? And on that rather interesting note, I think I'm going to end today's video. That was the latest episode of This Week in Hockey. What do you guys think about the topics that we discussed, or some of the interesting stories that have taken place throughout the league this week? Do let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Also, feel free to send me some more suggestions for some other topics you'd like me to explore in the next video. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. A big thank you to Bexy93, Burned Retinas, Drew4 Sid, Houston NG, Raquel, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.